in this trade, we have the Houston Rockets making the acquisition of Kevin Durant, easy money sniper, coming over to Houston from Phoenix in exchange for Jalen Green, Fred VanVleet, a first round pick, and 5 second rounders. So a crazy, not a crazy big haul for a talent like Kevin Durant, but I think you also have to be real with yourself and realize Kevin Durant's getting up there in age. So the draft capital to not get too many first rounders, I think is fair. I think it's okay. I am not mad at that. And you also have to understand that this is this is the best trade they were able to make. The Phoenix Suns were up against the wall. They had terrible contracts or a terrible contract in a player like Bradley Beal, and then they had no depth on their roster whatsoever. So a trade was desperately needed. This was a desperation move. They really, you just got some picks and some solid players back. You got yeah, like I said, Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, solid players. But now there's rumors that Jalen Green is getting shopped around. He might be on the move again, and I hope they can get 2 first rounders maybe. I think he's worth 2 first rounders considering his young age and considering the potential he's demonstrated. So why not? Why not chase more draft capital? But if they do that, you got to really think, man, is Devin Booker potentially on the move? I don't know. This trade, while it was expected, while it had been in the news for weeks, now that it has officially happened, it really does make you think. I really want to know what is in store for the Phoenix Suns, and in turn, what is in store for one of the best guards in the entire league. But what are your guys' thoughts?
Honestly, the thing that stood out to me the most that you said there, I know we're talking about Kevin Durant, but I think Devin Booker should be in the shop window, honestly. I think if you're going to rebuild, properly rebuild. Just throw it all out, get all the picks you can, and start from the beginning, because the Suns are a terrible organization. Holy crap. This is one of the worst organizations I've seen. Even the fact that they went with that and we gotta call out Stephen A for that too, like the lethal weapon 3 or lethal whatever the hell he was talking about when they got Bradley Beal. And it was like Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, that is the best offensive lineup I've seen in the history of the NBA, or whatever the hell he was saying. Like that, it did not pan out, bro. Not only did it not pan out, it's been spectacularly mid. Like that has been like the worst, like 3-star super team combo. That, when has that ever felt like a super team? If we're even talking about, when have we ever even seen them put together an extended stretch of games where they're all healthy and all firing? Like, to me, that has been one of the worst trades in modern NBA history. It was just terrible. It was honestly terrible. And the fact that the Suns, one, I know KD, as great as he still is, as we know with everyone, he has limited time left. So at least to be at this levels, he's going to want to maximize his career. And unfortunately for KD, whether you agree with it or not, there's still always going to be that chirp, that thing on his shoulder where it's like, you can't get it done outside of that Golden State situation. And he has been desperately trying to find another situation where he's like, okay, I can be the guy to take him to that ring outside of the situation that was tailor-made for me to dominate and never be like even competitive with another team. And to be fair, he got close with Brooklyn, but even then, he's desperate. You can smell it. Like you said, like that close, really. But he's desperate, and you can tell he's desperate. Just looking for any situation that could even potentially be there. But is Houston that situation? I'm not 100% sure. I think Houston, like we talked about in previous episodes, I didn't have my eye on them too much, but I was saying, okay, there's like an up and coming team, young team that's making moves, made it to the playoffs in a deep Western Conference, and got bounced in the first round in 7 games by the Warriors. But it was like, okay, this is a young team with a great coach, and maybe in the next, I remember we were saying at the time, in the next, we both predicted them to get bounced. we were like, this is some experience they need. Maybe next year, the year after, they're making moves, they're making waves, and eventually they can make their way up the ladder in the Western Conference. Tough now when you see what the Thunder are, but still. Now they they still have youth for sure, but you're trading away some of that core in a Jalen Green. I know Dylan Brooks isn't technically that young core, but you're trading away some of that in a Jalen Green and picks for Kevin Durant, who's on the complete opposite end of that spectrum. So I guess you're in win now mode. I think whenever you get someone of a Kevin Durant at his age, you're always in win now. I think even when you get Kevin Durant, whenever you're in win now mode, but Kevin Durant especially now, you're in win now mode, and I guess you're hoping his talent, his ability, his experience can elevate the youth and the rest of the team to becoming a true contender in 1 year, 2 years before it's kind of on the decline. I don't know. I don't know if that's necessarily. I don't. Yeah, I don't know if I can see that necessarily panning out. It'll be interesting for sure. It'll be interesting. Maybe this is how the Rockets finally beat the Warriors in a series. But even if the Rockets face the Warriors next year, if the Warriors beat them, that would be the funniest full circle moment in Kevin Durant's career, because really the Warrior allegations will never go to rest at that point. I know I'm kind of all over the place because there's a lot of different moving parts to this trade, but I guess the main point is, does Kevin Durant to the Rockets make Kevin Durant an instant finals, even finals appearance contender? To me, I'm not too sure. And for the Suns, honestly, get rid of Devin Booker. That's all I got to say about the Suns. Get rid of Devin Booker. Honestly, I'm not too fond of Devin Booker, period. And maybe that's a blasphemous thing to say. I don't think he's necessarily the problem as much as the Bradley Beal. The Bradley Beal, what the hell? What is his career, bro? Bradley Beal is the most disappointing NBA career in a minute. But Devin Booker, even then, I'm not too sold on him. I know he had that run to the finals where they lost, but still, to me, especially seeing someone like a Shea has gone on to do, maybe you could say if Booker's in Shea's position, it's similar. But I just think, I don't know. I think we kind of saw flashes of, Devin Booker could be this, and people were comparing him to Kobe back then. Remember, people were comparing him to Kobe, and that's why I'm kind of hesitant. I'm not saying you're doing the same thing. I'm kind of hesitant in any kind of comparison of that kind. But now I'm like, was that just a flash in the pan? You got your signature sneaker, and now you're kind of just
Worst signature sneaker in the league, by the way.
Yeah, that trash, absolute trash. But I don't know. I kind of threw out a lot of different points there. I don't know if there's any thread there that you wanted to pick out.
Yeah. No, there's a couple things. So, okay, I actually think the Houston Rockets are finals contenders. Okay. You were just a 2 seed, and you got rid. And here's what I see: you got rid of a young piece with a high ceiling in Jalen Green, along with Dylan Brooks, a for sure 3-and-D player who can perform in the playoffs. Can provide that spark. Now, the issue with Jalen Green is his inconsistency, and that's been the main thing that I think has plagued his career, and probably the reason why he was let go. Because in an alternate world, it's Van Vliet that they could have let go of. Could have been Fred Van Vliet that they would have traded away, because Fred Van Vliet has proved himself. He's won his ring. We know his worth. But with a player like Jalen Green, he's not that consistent, and it's still very early on in his career. So selling him this early, trading him this early, gives the other team this potential illusion of, we may have another star in our hands that may never end up panning out. So it's hard for me to hate on the Rockets, because I actually think they played their cards perfectly. Because now if we look up and down on their roster, Fred Van Vliet, you have the guard, the playmaker, who has great perimeter defense. You have Amen Thompson, great perimeter defense, very athletic, young guard. And that's going to be the theme in this entire team. Kevin Durant at the 3. Then you have Jabari Smith Jr., who's a big man, who's very athletic, who can shoot the 3. So you have perimeter shooting, you have perimeter defense, and I haven't even mentioned what Kevin Durant brings to the table. And I haven't mentioned Alperen Şengün, who is nicknamed Baby Jokic. He has the potential to be that point center, so to also distribute the ball, to also be a threat on the perimeter. And so when you look at that, this Rockets team, and I haven't even mentioned Steven Adams, a veteran big man who is coming off the bench, who is a great defensive piece, who can defend the paint, can defend the rim, and who will go to war for his team. So you look up and down, this is a 2 seed that just added one of the greatest offensive players ever, who is still in very great condition. The Rockets made a very, very, very calculated, very good move, in my opinion. I love this trade for them. I would not be surprised if they make it to the finals next year, because they had a very, very fair shake with the Warriors, and they lost. Yeah, but that can be brought back to experience. You're going against Curry, you're going against Jimmy Butler. It's going to be a little tough, but now you've added one of the best players to ever play the game, man. I know he's old. I know the window is short right now. It's very small. But I think in the era of parity, like everyone has been saying, you have to go for it. So me personally, I like this trade for the Rockets.
Yeah, I see your points. I see your points. There's only two issues I have, and I think maybe even with those two issues, we see them make. I don't know. I still think finals is a push. I think conference finals I can see. But here's I guess my two main issues, and maybe you can address these too. For me, I guess maybe I don't weigh the regular season that heavily in the NBA, just because so many teams. I know Max used to always say something like this. Like, so many teams make the playoffs that it's hard to, especially now with the play-in, it's hard to truly weigh the regular season like accurately. And to me, when you're a 2 seed who gets bounced by a 7, I know the West is so volatile and all those places are really close. But they ended up at the end of the season, they ended up being like a solid 2 seed. Like, in terms of I think I don't remember the exact standings, but I remember it was like 3 down was like a crazy. I think 2 would like actually made like a solid. They were like comfortably 2. And I think if you're a 2 who gets bounced by a 7, that's one of those teams. It's kind of like the Thunder. I don't remember exactly where the Thunder went out last year, but the Thunder were still amazing last year in the regular season, and they didn't make it all the way. Experience, all that kind of stuff, and to me, that feels like an empty seating. And maybe that's harsh, but that's kind of how I feel about when teams that that are up and coming and they have a great regular season and everyone gets excited and they're like, "Oh my God, this reach is actually on the up," and then they reach the playoffs and you're like, "Actually, how you do over the course of these 82 games doesn't really matter that much, because when it comes down to it, you still got clapped by the team who's been here and done that." And to me, that makes them feel like an empty 2 seed if you get bounced by the Warriors, who had to come out of the play-in to even face you. And it's 7 games, sure, but you didn't get it done. So like that 2 seed to me feels more like a 6, if you're really like weighing a 6 or a 7, like weighing like the what you actually were able to do with when everything's on the line. So I think even if you're talking about a 6, adding Kevin Durant, okay, then maybe now you're a true 2 seed, like even just off the strength of Kevin Durant alone, and that's enough to take you to a conference finals. I think that's like the slight difference in valuation between me and you. Like, you're seeing 2 seed plus Kevin, that should be maybe a finals. And I think I'm looking at them like a 5 to 7 plus Kevin, that maybe now they're actually like a 2 seed, and maybe that's like a conference finals. Just because that empty seating for me doesn't hit as much. And then the other issue I have, and call this blasphemous, because like you said, at the end of the day, he's still going to go down as one of the greatest players ever, top 20, Kevin Durant, but he still hasn't proved it. In all of his career, he still hasn't proven. And you're that guy. He hasn't gotten it done, and he's had better teams than this. Well, at least maybe not depth wise, but but in terms of like number 2, number 3 talent around him, he's had better teams than this. Than I'm not talking about that Warriors team where he was the number 1 guy, but he wasn't the number 1 guy. If that makes sense. Like, obviously he was the number 1 guy in terms of ability and actual production, but we all know whose team it was. Whenever it's his team, he hasn't gotten it done. And I know that's the biggest criticism against him, and maybe to an extent, if you're looking at that Brooklyn series, that it's a little unfortunate in certain cases. But now we're saying, okay, now you got to go to Houston, you got to be the guy, and maybe you got Steven Adams there in the wings, and you got Fred VanVleet. He himself is what, like 30, probably like 31, 32 or something. There's a couple older guys too, but you have to now lead this young team to the finals. I don't know if that's like a Kevin Durant bag to be in. Like, I don't know if Kevin Durant, if I'm thinking of all the players in the league, I don't see Kevin Durant as like, you're the guy who's going to lead a young team, a young, inexperienced team as like the OG to this promised land. I don't know. That's not the archetype I would put him in, but maybe you can't put players in a box like that. So I guess he can surprise me next year as well.
Okay. So in response to the first thing, the fluke 2 seed is what we could call it. I actually think, yes, there's validity to that for sure. Because when you go from a team that goes, and I think Charles Barkley has said this a lot, but when you go from the hunter, which is what you can categorize this season as, the Rockets were the hunters because they came out firing, they racked up a lot of wins, they got the 2 seed, to then become the hunted, right? Teams are now expecting to be playing you and to be putting their best foot forward because they know that there's talent on that roster. That's going to be a big test next year. Yes, I think there's validity. Maybe this is a fluke 2 seed. We don't know. However, what I will say as well is that they faced the Warriors. And if we remember, the Warriors did not get off to a hot start. They made that Jimmy Butler trade and it turned their season around. So I actually think that 7 seed isn't an honest 7 seed. I think this is more realistically in a regular, say Jimmy Butler had been with the team from the very start of the season, because mind you, they didn't even give themselves time to gel. They kind of just figured it out straight through. I think, yes, there were some hiccups, but they turned around the season and they were able to make their way into the playoffs. So that's something that I have to respect the Warriors for. Realistically, that team, when you're the Rockets, is likely a team that you're going to see in the second round or maybe even the conference finals. I think conference finals may be a little bit too, considering what we saw the Thunder just do. But, I think if you now think of it as, okay, the Rockets may have been a second round exit this season because they faced an honest team that had a fair shot at making the conference finals. You're looking at this very differently. And it came down to a game 7, an inexperienced team against a very experienced team. So I think there's that to be said. There is still, yes, did the seed on paper, a 2 seed losing to a 7 seed is never going to look good. But then when you look at the way the season played out, I'm not sure if the Warriors are an honest 7 seed. So that's my point about that. And then to your point about KD being the number 1 option on a young team, I think that's fair. I think that's been one of his greatest criticisms, is that he isn't a vocal leader. Like, that's been what the case has been in Brooklyn. I think that was a big criticism that he had. He didn't really speak up against the Kyrie drama, against the James Harden drama. He really kept it under wraps. He really is, to his own detriment, considered to be like the ultimate hooper, because he literally just goes and hoops and plays his heart out and isn't necessarily going to be the person that is kind of lighting a fire under the team. That's what the papers say. That's what the reports say. That's what I'm going off of. Do I know if that's true? I don't. But considering the evidence of what we see from KD, I don't think it's an unbelievable statement, right? So, but in that same breath, you have players who have been there and who have done it. You have a Fred VanVleet. I guess Steven Adams never won a chip, but he made it far with Russ. He had very magical runs with the Thunder. So you have toughness, you have leadership. I think there is that there. But yes, I think you're going to have to be under, what I will say is they are under a great coach. So I really hope that Ime Udoka can squeeze the most out of this team, because it's so sad the way not that Boston did him dirty, he did himself dirty. The reason why he is no longer in Boston is his own fault, but he should have been lifting that Larry O'Brien and not Joe Mazzulla. It shouldn't have been Joe Mazzulla.
100% agree.
Yeah. So he built that. I mean, not built it, but he is the person who like kind of laid out the blueprint with the roster that won that championship. The fact that he left that team, it's tragic. It's his fault, but we now know that this is a good coach that you have on your hands, and it's a good coach that got them to a 2 seed, and now you have Kevin Durant, so hopefully he can light a fire under this roster. So, to conclude, I think, and I say, I believe in this Rockets team.
Fair. I think the main point to me that gives that more credence than anything is the Ime Udoka point. I think if it was just any other coach, I think we fear seeing like history repeating itself with previous KD situations, where it's like, because he's the hooper, just like the pure hooper, like he's gonna go out there, he's gonna do his thing, maybe not elevate his team in the sense that some other great players in the way they might, and we see them go out in the second round or something like that, and we're like, okay, that's a shame. But I think because they have a coach of that level, a coach who's probably sneakily the best coach in the league, I think potentially, I think people are going to argue there's other contenders, yeah, but I think seeing what he did, like you said, with that Boston team, seeing how well, even though I call it empty seating, how well, even the fact that the Rockets were even able to have that quote unquote empty seating or fluke seating, I think just on raw ability, arguably the best coach in the league, pound for pound. I think that is the element that can, I think, level out KD's deficiencies, because KD doesn't have many. In terms of just basketball, he's damn near the perfect player. But in terms of like those intangibles that we look for in those star players, he has some of those deficiencies. And I think a coach like Ime, like you said, I think that really could be the deciding factor in a team like that going far. So that's convinced me a bit. I could see them, like you said, Thunder, you can never really bet against them. The Nuggets with an actual coach next year, you can never really bet against them. That's a whole other X factor that you still have to account for from this offseason. And the MVP, like I said, and like you said, the MVP Jokic, the true MVP Jokic, who went on this crazy run with no coach. You have to account for that next year. And of course, the West is always the West. But I think it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun for sure either way.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Man, I'm excited, man. I want this new season to kick off, man. We just finished up, but there's some new storylines underway, and since it's the NBA offseason, we can only expect more storylines to develop. And I hope we see some movement, because I think the current state of the NBA needs a little bit of a shakeup. It always happens. There always seems to be a shakeup. This past trade deadline had a lot of things go down, but I think there's gonna be a lot of teams making moves. So we'll see what's to come. But this may go down as the biggest trade of the summer. We'll see what happens. It's like Luka still happened a few months ago. We forget that still happened. So we never know what's cooking up. We never know what's kept under wraps.